שבוע טוב. Welcome everyone for the lecture of Shurat Hadin, Israel Law Center, about North Korean and Iran war against Israel. My name is Nitzana Darshan-Leitner. I'm the founder and director of Shurat Hadin. And I want to tell you how we know Professor Bruce Bechtel, our speaker tonight. In 1972, a horrible terror attack happened in the Lord Airport attack. Lord Airport, today Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. It was done by a terror cell from the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, along with the Japanese Red Army. And we all remember the name Kozo Akamoto, but he had two partners that went and planned to carry out attack. They actually planned to hijack a plane. But after scrutinized and realized the security arrangements in El Al, they realized that they will not be able to hijack an Israeli plane. So they changed and decided to carry out an attack in Israel, at the airport itself. So they took an Air France flight from Rome to Tel Aviv. And when they reached the airport, when they reached Tel Aviv, they went to the arrival hall. Back then, the arrival hall was where the passengers came in, and they were waiting for their bags to come on the carousels. When their bags arrived, they opened the bags and pulled out guns and hand grenades and started shooting towards all the people in the crowd. 20 people were killed. 17 of them were Puerto Rican pilgrims that came to Israel, Christians that saved their entire life to visit the Holy Land. We represent these Puerto Rican pilgrims in a lawsuit that we wanted to file against the state that is responsible for this horrible attack, North Korea. We realized that North Korea gave these people shelter after the attack, the group that sent them over. They gave them money, they gave them ammunition, they gave them training. They built camps in South Lebanon to train them. They sent agents to train them. So we filed a case against North Korea in the San Juan Federal Court. And we had experts testifying about the liability of North Korea. We used Professor Bruce Bechtel that gave extraordinary testimony about the relationship of North Korea and the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine and the Japanese Red Army. We used late Professor Barry Rubin from the IDC, and we won a judgment against North Korea for $378 million. Later on, we filed more cases against North Korea. During the Second Lebanese War, Hezbollah shot missiles towards Israel. And they shoot them from underground tunnels that North Korea helped building. This is one of the topics that Professor Bechtel will speak about. And we have another lawsuit against North Korea on behalf of Christian priests that was kidnapped from South Korea and helping to cross the border from North Korean refugees to China, help them to escape. Has nothing to do with Israel, but when we were asked to represent the family of this priest that was kidnapped by North Korea, put in jail in North Korea, was starved and tortured to death in North Korea, we did not say no. and we filed these 2 more cases. We won judgments, and now we're working on enforcing them. This is our connection to North Korea, and when we learned that Mr. Bruce Bechtel will be coming to Israel, we thought it would be a great opportunity to introduce you to you. So before we are introducing Professor Bechtel himself, I would like to introduce Avi Leitner, that will tell you just a little bit about our coming program, and will introduce the professor. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Okay, Shavua Tov, you can hear me? Just wanted to, before we introduce tonight's speaker, just wanted to make everybody aware, in June we're going to be running our 2nd annual Law of War conference. It's called Towards a New Law of War. The conference deals with how the Geneva Convention and how the current laws of armed conflict are being interpreted in a manner which makes democratic countries like Israel, like the United States, like Israel, like the United States, unable basically to fight, and be able to defend their civilian populations with this asymmetrical warfare that's being carried out against Israel and against other Western countries by terror groups. The deck is definitely slanted against Israel and against other democratic states. Israel's not able to fight back. Every time we fire one rocket, fire one bullet, they claim that we're killing civilians. They're free to fire rockets and open fire on Israel from kindergartens and from schools and from mosques, and there's no even playing field. So we believe that the main problem right now is how the Geneva Convention is being interpreted. It was written after World War II. It wasn't written for the type of warfare that's being conducted nowadays. It's just not relevant to the modern battlefield, and we believe that the laws of war have to be changed in order to allow democratic countries like Israel and armies like the IDF to be able to fight, and to be able to fight efficiently to safeguard their civilian populations. So the Law of War Conference, some of you were at it last year, was a tremendous success. We sold out. It's a 2-day conference. It's going to be held this year here in Jerusalem on June 20th and June 21st. It's going to be at the Dan Hotel up on Mount Scopus. So you'll start to see advertisements for that. Some of you took the flyers that we have. Please try to attend. Please try to, we're bringing in speakers from all over the world. So, our military people, we're bringing in professors. We have some political people coming as well. Last year, Benny Gantz opened the conference, and Boogie Yalon closed the conference. So it's a good opportunity to really to learn more about this topic and to hear people who are involved with trying to allow the IDF to fight back fairly. And now I'm going to introduce tonight's speaker. Dr. Bruce Bechtel is an award-winning professor of political science at Angelo State University in Texas and a retired 20-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Prior to joining academia, Dr. Bechtel was an intelligence officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency, eventually serving as the senior intelligence analyst for Northeastern Asia in the Intelligence Directorate on the Joint Staff in the Pentagon. He currently sits on the editorial advisory board of the Korea Observer and the Scientific Board of Global Humanities. He is the president of the International Council on Korean Studies and serves on the board of directors of the Council on U.S.-Korean Security Studies. A widely sought-after expert on North Korean international security issues, Dr. Bechtel has been called on to present commentary to the BBC, CBC, Fox News, Radio New Zealand, syndicated nationwide radio shows such as POTUS, Politics on Sirius XM, and I'm not going to read everything he's ever appeared on, but the National Public Radio, just to name a few. He's the author or editor of 6 books and has published 34 articles in peer-reviewed academic journals. Dr. Bechtel received his bachelor's in liberal studies in 1994 from Excelsior College, his MA in International Affairs from Catholic University, a Master's in Military Studies as a distinguished graduate from the U.S. Marine Corps Command and Staff College, and his PhD in National Security Studies in 2000 from the Union Institute. He's coming to Israel to conduct research. He has a grant, and he's conducting research on the involvement of North Korea with terrorism in different places around the world, including the Middle East. And tonight he's agreed to come and give this lecture to discuss the role of North Korea in the secret war North Korea is conducting against Israel and against other Western democratic states using terrorism and terror proxies. So without any further ado, let's have a round of applause for Dr. Bechtel.
How y'all doing? Can everybody hear me? If you can't hear me, raise your hand. I'm really happy to be in Israel. This is my very first time in Israel. And stop clapping. You're supposed to clap when I'm done. I'm a former Marine. Let's keep things disciplined here. Okay. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about the North Korean threat to Israel, specifically in the Middle East. Every single slide that I put up here tonight is going to be relevant to the security of Israel. Now, we all know that the United States finds North Korea to be an extreme threat to our national security interests. One of the national security interests of the United States is that of our ally, South Korea. Excuse me, well, yeah, South Korea too, but that of our ally, Israel. So this is something that people are finally starting to talk about in a serious way in the United States. And everything that I will tell you has been confirmed. And I'd be happy to talk about my sources if you have questions of that. Everybody see the slide? If you can't see the slide, get bifocals. How am I doing? Okay. So let's talk about North Korea. The first aspect of North Korea, I'm going to talk about what their capabilities are, and then I'm going to talk about how they proliferate those capabilities. So, if we're going to talk about North Korea, I'm going to take my glasses off because I'm having a hard time reading this. I thought glasses were supposed to help with that. Their nuclear capability, their plutonium weaponization program is proven. Are you getting an echo the same as I am? Yeah. Can everybody hear me if I just yell?
No.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
You have to speak louder.
You mean you want me to speak louder like this? All right.
You're right.
Yeah. I'm gonna. Can you still hear me if I don't have a microphone? All right. I'll use the microphone until they get that echo fixed. Anyway, the plutonium weaponization program of North Korea has been confirmed since 1994 when the Central Intelligence Agency, which when I was at DIA we called the Cheesehead Intelligence Agency, confirmed in 1994 that North Korea had at least 2 plutonium weapons. Now, just to make it very clear, that means that North Korea right now today has, at the very least, and it's proven, has a plutonium weapon that's very primitive and is about the size of what the United States, they call it the Army Air Force, what the U.S. Air Force dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. Something that could kill about 80,000 people immediately, and then many thousands others would die after that. Now, if they can't put it on a missile, you may ask, why is this a concern to the United States? Because the North Koreans could put it on a nondescript merchant vessel and sail it into someplace like Norfolk or LA or New York Harbor and blow it up and kill 80,000 people in a minute. So that's a capability that they have right now that's proven in every way it could be. Another capability that they have is highly enriched uranium. How many people here know what highly enriched uranium is? How many people don't know what highly enriched uranium is? How many people here have seen Three Faces of Eve? Joanne Woodward, Academy Award-winning performance, 1958. But I digress. Highly enriched uranium is important for the North Koreans and important to this conversation, excuse me, because highly enriched uranium can be put on a 500-kilogram warhead and put on a missile. Highly enriched uranium, yes. That means that the North Koreans can use this in more than a primitive way. They can put it on a warhead that goes on specifically the No-Dong missile. And the Nodon missile for North Korea can hit Tokyo. They got these plans. I'm off. Everybody hear me better? Much better? Good job. Bravo Zulu, or as they would say in Morse code, da did it, da did it. So that means they could put it on a missile, and the North Koreans could, and fire it at Tokyo, kill those people kill 80,000 people in a minute, as I said. Why is that important to Israel? Well, because they sold the same missile that they can hit Japan with to the Iranians. The Iranians call it the Shahab 3, and we'll talk more about that. North Korea shows no signs of slowing down its nuclear program. We all know that. Everybody knows about the test in January, right? Okay. What about ballistic missile programs? North Korea put an ICBM through all 3 stages of its flight for the first time successfully on 12/12/12. Now we have the Korean consul here, and I want to thank you for coming, by the way. But everybody who understands Korea knows numbers are really important, right? My wife's a member of the 386 generation, so we all know numbers are a big deal to Koreans. So 12/12/12 was symbolic. The 12th of December, 2012, the North Koreans successfully tested a 3-stage missile for the first time. They did it again last month. On February 7th, 20 minutes before the Republican debate, I might add, was about to go on a Saturday, they again tested a missile, a 3-stage missile, from the launch pad at up in the northwestern part of the country. This time it was very important, and I'll explain why. That will be on a later slide. This missile is capable, and this is this, by the way, is an example of the ranges of their missiles. This missile has the range to hit Alaska, Hawaii, and probably the 3 states that sit on the west coast of the United States, but not Texas. That's right, baby. So why is this important? Well, they tested this missile, an advanced version of this missile, that can go farther and hit other places farther than just the west coast of the United States, that had a new and improved 80-ton rocket booster that they developed specifically for the Iranians. So the Iranians will have this same missile probably within the next few months. They have other missiles that are very important. They have the Musadon missile, which has a range of 4,000 kilometers and can hit Guam from North Korea. I spent 2 years on Guam in the Marine Corps when I was there, and some of the best beach bars in the Western Pacific, or so I've heard. I don't drink. But they also have the Nodon, and by the way, the Musadon in Iran is called the Shahab 4. North Korea sold 18 of those missiles to Iran in 2005. They successfully tested it to a range of 4,000 kilometers in 2006, and the Shahab 4 can hit NATO headquarters in Brussels from Iran. So we got that going for us. They have the Nodon I talked about already, range of 1,500 kilometers, can hit Israel from Iran, and can be equipped with a HEU, highly enriched uranium warhead, which the North Koreans have been helping the Iranians to develop. And they have Scuds. The very first missile the North Koreans ever got, they got from the Egyptians in 1979, and just like their South Korean brethren, who are really good at making lots of things that have nothing to do with war, they turned it into their own system. And 4 years later, they sold their first Scud B to Iran, a whole bunch of them, and that was the missiles that they used to fire at Iraq in the Iran-Iraq War of the Cities. Remember that back in the mid-'80s? Yeah, okay. So interesting stuff. How about chemical weapons programs? If anybody gets bored, raise your hand. I'll start tap dancing on the stage. North Korea has probably the best developed chemical weapons program among rogue states. It's more developed than the Syrian chemical weapons program. It's more developed than the Iranian chemical weapons program. How do I know that? Because they helped both those countries develop their chemical weapons programs. And I listed the types of chemical weapons that they have here. They have, and this has been proven from defector testimonies, they have tested these chemical weapons on human subjects in North Korea. So if you're somebody who's a prisoner, your family's fallen out of favor, these have been tested on human subjects in North Korea. One of the few countries that I know of that's ever done that in the history of mankind.
We don't hear you, you're fading out.
Am I fading out? Can you hear me now? 5,000 tons of chemical weapons agents. I asked our South Korean allies last August when I was in Korea for 3 weeks why they say 5,000 tons, because that estimate has been around for at least 15 years, and the answer has always been, that's the last estimate we had. But they have a lot. And you can hear me now?
Still not clear.
Hold it this way.
Hold it perfect.
How's this?
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody better? All right. I'll be singing later, by the way. So key platforms for launching chemical weapons are Scud missiles and artillery. And when I say artillery, does everybody know what an MRL is, a multiple rocket launcher? That's their primary method for launching short-range chemical weapons, and they've of course done that with the Syrians. They helped the Syrians with a program. I'll talk about that later. Proliferation of their chemical weapons program to the Middle East is a big concern. Way back, like 15 years ago when I was an analyst at DIA, the North Koreans used to go out to Syria every year and do an exercise with the Syrians in full mop gear. Everybody here knows what mop gear is, right? We put on the whole floppy suit that makes you sweat a lot, and then you put the mask on and all that stuff. They did exercises with live chemical weapons going way back into the late 1990s with the Syrians. And they've done more, and I'll talk about that later. North Korean TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures. There are several things that they do to proliferate their weapon systems. They'll place North Korean weapons on a cargo ship, a container ship, and they'll actually place them among legal stuff. And usually these weapons, they could range on anything from small arms to, ballistic missiles, are on a ship that's not even flagged to North Korea. But when those ships sail, typically what North Koreans do is, let's say a ship leaves Nampo Harbor, which is the port that serves Pyongyang. When those ships leave North Korea, they will change planes as often as 24 times before they hit their final destination. It is next to impossible to follow those guys unless you actually plant a bug on the hull of the ship. Not that we've ever done that. So that's one thing they do. They take advantage of loose transshipment regs, false cargo declarations, etc. And why is it so easy for them to do that? Does anybody know why that is? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller?
Money.
Huh?
Money.
Money? Well, that's that's partially correct. Because most of those shipments go through China first. And China lets the North Koreans, or at least they have up till now, pretty much do whatever they want with those shipments. So it's very easy to do. They use phony front companies to hire ships. They'll use aircraft, fly those through China, and they'll often operate through a completely falsified web of intrigue. North Korea, everybody hear about the UN sanctions that just happened a couple days ago regarding North Korea? You know why those probably aren't going to work as well as we'd like them to?
China.
Yes, because China has, since the very beginning, since we started putting sanctions on them, always gone out of their way to water those sanctions down. Then once the sanctions are actually implemented, they just don't enforce them. China has a border of 870 miles with North Korea. That stuff goes across that border all the time. And they fly through China.
Can I ask a question? Why
The answer is B.
Why is it in China's interest to allow North Korea to do that?
Because China doesn't want North Korea to collapse. Next question.
Isn't China a real friend in disguise with working with North Korea against the United States? Isn't China our #1 enemy?
Could be. But let me answer that gentleman's question a little deeper. China does not want U.S. forces on the mainland of Asia on their border. Remember, U.S. forces are in South Korea right now. So China, it is to China's national security interest to ensure that North Korea continues to exist as a nation state and act as a buffer between them and the democratically elected government in South Korea. Does that answer your question? That's why they allow them to do that stuff. Let's talk about North Korean key proliferation activities. They do it 4 ways. There's 4 key things that they proliferate and different things they do. First, they proliferate WMD and the platforms that carry it. When I say WMD, and everybody hears me now, right? When I say WMD, I mean chemical, biological, nuclear weapons. And what are the platforms that carry them? What are missiles, Alex, right? Missiles and artillery, because artillery shoots chemical, biological weapons as well. They also have made a great deal of money, specifically over the past 15 years, with refurbishing old Soviet-era weapons for countries that still use them, such as Syria, such as many countries in Africa. But for folks concerned about the security of Israel, Syria is a big deal, and I'll talk about that later. Technical and military assistance and advising. Niksana talked about a court case that we did 6 years ago. The North Koreans actually send advisors into Lebanon to train Hezbollah on how to do a variety of things, including building tunnels, including commando operations training, etc. There's also a key thing that North Korea has done since the 1990s. I'm going to take a drink here. That's really vodka, by the way. The key thing that they've done is they've switched from sending whole systems over to countries like Iran and Syria to building fabrication facilities in those countries and then just shipping smaller shipments of parts that would be used to build those systems. They've done this with missiles, chemical weapons, and with highly enriched uranium centrifuge technology. Now, can anybody guess why they would do that?
Because it's easier, much easier, and not detectable.
It's easier to get through security.
Yeah, this young man just said it. Because it makes it easier to proliferate stuff. In other words, it's harder to hide missiles than it is to hide missile parts.
Right.
So they send this stuff to countries like Syria and Iran, both countries of which have Scud missile fabrication facilities. Iran also has Nodong fabrication facilities. They call it the Shahab 3. They send it to these countries, and then they have North Korean advisors that help them put these missiles together and even test them. So that has been a very successful way that North Korea has gotten around sanctions, really since about the beginning of the 2000s. Let me go back here. Okay.
I have a question, if I may.
The answer is C.
Regarding the so-called Iranian deal, was any of this, obviously the U.S. government knows about it. Was any of this put into the negotiations to negotiate with Iran?
I'll talk about it on a further slide, I promise. All right? Okay. Proliferation of nuclear and chemical and missile programs is the biggest threat. Their most important customers are, as I said, Iran and Syria, and it includes nuclear, chemical, biological, even to Syria they send biological, and the platforms, and as well as the assembling facilities. It also includes today, right now, as we're here sitting in this room, large-scale assistance and advising services. In other words, when Iran has a fabrication facility that puts together Shahab 3, which is basically just a Nodong with Farsi written on the side, when they put that missile together, it's not their missile. It's a North Korean missile with North Korean parts that's put together with North Koreans in their factory. So just keep that in mind as we see the ludicrous Iranian, we just fired another one of our indigenously produced missiles. Well, not exactly. Also includes large lots of advisors that do lots of other things, such as training, both for Iran and Syria. And a lot of that training takes place in places like Lebanon and in Iran. But it's important, and as I have in the slide here, I said from cradle to grave. So when Iran buys, let's say, a series of no-dong missiles from North Korea, or these missiles are produced in their factory, the North Koreans test it for them. They help them assemble it. And then they help them test it when it's test fired, and then they stay there for future systems. So it's kind of like buying a Kia, right? I have a 10-year guarantee on my Kia. I drive a Kia Sorento. At least I used to until I gave it to my daughter to drive. But she's at the University of Iowa. Go Hawkeyes. But you know, it's exactly that kind of deal. Cradle to grave. And it's been very useful for both Syria and Iran and North Korea. In Iran's case, it's been ongoing without a stop since 1983. So, let's talk about Iran specifically. And if I don't answer the gentleman's question, raise your hand again or yell out or beat me with a stick. Iran is North Korea's oldest, most robust customer. How robust, you may ask? $3.5 billion a year worth of sales for the North Koreans. It's a lot of weapons. WMD materials began in the early 1980s, as I said, with a Scud-B. North Korea has now sold every single kind of missile, ballistic missile, that they make. Everybody can still hear me, right? That they make to Iran. Scud-B, Scud-C, Scud-D, ER, which is the extended range Scud, Musadon, No-Dong, and now Tapo-Dong technology to Iran. If North Korea has built it, it's not a matter of if Iran will get it, it's a matter of when. Iranian engineers, technicians, VIPs have been present at almost every single missile test that North Korea has conducted. They were at the last nuclear test that North Korea conducted. They weren't at the missile test in February. My wife says I should quit smoking cigars. What the hell does she know? Anyway. North Korea assisted Iran in building its own fabrication facilities, and I talked about that earlier. But wait, there's more. North Korea has assisted Tehran in the construction and flight of the Sphere. Everybody here knows what the Sphere is, right? No? It's a big, long missile. It is a solid-fueled missile. Excuse me, it's not a solid-fueled missile. It is a two-stage missile that the Iranians used to launch a satellite into space. Remember when they put that worm into space? Yeah. That's the missile, that's the rocket they used. The first stage of a Sphere is a no-dome.
Is that what they call a killer satellite?
I'll talk about that later too, if you like. You're talking about EMP technology?
Correct.
No, Sphere. Well, maybe they want to do that later. The satellite they launched before had a worm inside that stayed alive. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't Iran's destruction be assured if they launched a missile? Would there be any question that they would be obliterated? If they did,
Well, that's a political question. We'll talk about that later. That's a political question. Right now I'm talking about... Okay. Are you talking about the United States or Israel? Would they obliterate them?
Israel has capability.
Right. We can talk about that. North Korea has also assisted with solid fuel missiles that Iran has. Iran has a solid fuel program. And they've done that by taking technology from other missiles they have and applying it to those solid fuel missiles. If there is a liquid, everybody knows the difference between liquid and solid fuel, right? A liquid fueled missile is fueled by liquid in a solid seriously, a solid fuel missile typically takes less time to get going, to use the formal term. And that means that a country like Israel or the United States would have less warning time during which they could activate their forces. So it is actually pretty important. So there we are. The latest troubling thing with Iran and North Korea is this 80-ton rocket booster. Now, there was a gentleman in the crowd that asked me, how did this affect the talks that were going on between Iran and the United States about the P5+1, right? That's what you were asking me about?
Yes.
How does that affect them? Well, apparently not at all. But I'm a Republican, so I'm always right, and those guys are wrong. But I will tell you this. During those talks, newspapers in the United States were reporting that Iran and North Korea were in a deal for this 80-ton rocket booster. During those talks, Iranian technicians and engineers were going to North Korea, and it was widely reported. And no, the U.S. government did not do anything about it. After the deal was signed, please let me finish if I may.
Right.
After the deal was signed, the United States Treasury Department then sanctioned several Iranians and the Iranian government and SHIG, y'all know what that is, right? The liquid missile development company in Iran. They sanctioned them. So they knew all along, and they even admitted it after the talks were over. But the deal didn't get canceled. Does that answer your question now? I hope.
It's a good answer, just a bad one.
Pardon me?
It's a good answer, but a bad
Didn't the
one.
United States purposely say that the Iran deal had nothing to do with missiles?
No, they just didn't talk about it.
That's right. That's right.
So this
How
is
come we have permitted it?
this is a new missile, by the way. I took this picture out of the Israeli
Can we
press.
have questions at the end, please? It's
Sure.
ridiculous. It's disrupting. I can't follow.
Okay, well, one.
Yeah, let's take questions in the end.
Obviously, nobody was listening to me. I said, hold your applause till the end. Okay, let's talk more about about North Korean proliferation to Iran, nuclear and chemical weapons programs. Now, let me give you some background on this. In 2001, when the Bush people came in, they were told, surprisingly, by the Clinton people, oh, by the way, as we're leaving, North Korea has a highly enriched uranium program that we have never discussed with them or released in public. Enjoy your stay in the Pentagon. So, you know, the Bush people, you know, got right on this. In 2002, Ambassador James Kelly went to North Korea. You guys probably know about this. Certainly the Koreans in the crowd do. And said to the North Koreans, you have an HEU program. We know about it. Stop. And a few months before they had done that, remember what was going on in 2001 and 2002, right? The war in Afghanistan. We actually this was Colin Powell, told the Pakistanis if they didn't stop selling that HEU technology to North Korea, we were going to cut off all foreign aid to Pakistan. So right before those talks James Kelly engaged in, the aid to the Pakistanis cut him off. Meanwhile, he goes to North Korea in 2002 and says, you got an HEU program, and the North Koreans, I don't know, why you say it? We don't know, no. HEU, I don't know how you spell it again. And showed them pictures of centrifuges being offloaded from airplanes, etc. So very important stuff. Well, what happened after that? Well, then the North Koreans did what they always do. They got angry. They kicked out the IAEA inspectors. And the Pakistanis also cut off another rogue state they were supplying with nuclear technology. That would be Iran. What does that mean? It means in 2003, North Korean technicians, engineers, scientists started heading to Iran to help them with their HEU weaponization program. Specific aspects of it. Let me give examples. They actually built the underground facilities for Iran that they have their centrifuges in right now, this second. They also helped them with the same technology the Pakistanis had given them on constructing a warhead that would fit on a missile that the Iranians already had, the Nodon Shahab 3. Very interesting stuff. They're still doing that. There were so many North Koreans in Iran that were assisting them with their chemical, biological, nuclear, and their missile programs that the Iranians actually gave them their own resort to go hang out at on the ocean. So very interesting stuff. Well, you're probably thinking, Bruce, what about conventional weapons? Well, there's more. In 2015, the DPRK launched the KH-35 missile. Has anybody ever heard of this missile?
No.
It's an anti-ship missile. One guy has. Well done, sir. I never heard of it until I read about it. But the KH-35 missile, which can take out probably about 40% of the South Korean Navy. Not so effective against advanced shipping, but pretty good against a lot of stuff, including merchant shipping. Why is this significant to Israel? Well, because the kind of ship it's fired on, which you're looking at, that's actually a picture of the firing right there. It's fired from the same kind of ship which North Korea specifically built for Iran in 2002. The Iranians have 12 of these catamaran ships. Catamaran just means it's a low identity type ship, very difficult for radar to pick up. North Korea also built specifically for the Iranians what's called a Yono class submarine. The Yono class submarine is a small submarine, carries 4 guys, carries 2 torpedoes, 1 on each side, and it works well in the muddy waters off the west coast with rapidly changing tides of the Korean Peninsula. Where else do you see waters like that? Anybody know? Off the coast of Iran. So they built those Yono class submarines for the Iranians and built a bunch of them for themselves as well. And we know that it's an effective sub because in 2010, the North Koreans sank the Chonan. Remember the Chonan sinking in 2010 in Korea? They sank the Chonan with a Yono class submarine. They also sell them lots and lots of other naval craft, artillery, tanks, lots of stuff. And they're at military facilities all over Iran involved in the training of Iranian troops. They work specifically with the IRGC, not just in training, but in acquisition as well. Well, let's talk about Syria. Everybody knows that in 2007, the Israeli Air Force destroyed that facility in the desert. What you may not know is that that facility looked exactly like the facility at Yongbyon. Has everybody heard of Yongbyon? No. The plutonium facility in North Korea. The North Koreans, because they're clever people, they put a fake roof over the top so that you guys wouldn't figure out that it was actually an old style North Korean, literally North Korean style plutonium facility. Didn't work, obviously, because it was taken out by the Israelis. The CIA gave a very, very good brief, which I used as background for my second book, where they describe exactly how that was set up, who set it up, what North Korean scientists, engineers, etc. came over to Syria, and even how it was paid for. Can anyone guess who paid for this facility? Iran, which, as you know, in Morse code would be did it, did it. You all know that. So good stuff, and thank God it's gone. Chemical weapons program. This is something that has gained a lot of publicity in the past 3 years because of the Syrian civil war, right? Well, the Syrians have gotten a lot of publicity about their chemical weapons program. What they haven't gotten a lot of publicity about was how they got it and who trained them on it. North Koreans actually built a chemical weapons facility for the Syrians near Aleppo. North Koreans have actually been either right on the battlefield or near the battlefield, helping them specifically mate up these weapons, the warheads for the Scuds, and the Syrians use 122 millimeter multiple rocket launchers to fire these things into towns and cities, as you know. And the North Koreans have been there from cradle to grave, again, helping out with that chemical weapons program, which has proven to be very effective. Now, as a Korean specialist, when I watched what was going on in Syria, and me and a bunch of my friends, fellow Koreanists, were sitting around drinking beer one night, although I want to tell you, I normally don't drink that much. And we were talking about this, and we agreed. The North Koreans have basically used Syria as their training ground to improve their own chemical weapons program, because they're seeing what works, what doesn't work, what works best. And they discovered, by the way, that these 122 millimeter MRLs are more effective than the Scuds at carrying a chemical warhead. And why? Can anyone guess? Right. And they're more accurate. The Scud is not an accurate missile, not particularly accurate. I remember the Pakistanis did a missile test with the Nodong, and it missed its target by 10 miles, so they said the test was successful. Okay. So, you know, used to attack civilians, training ground for the North Koreans, not good stuff. Ballistic missiles. The North Koreans do not have Nodongs, they do not have Taepodongs, nor do they have the Moose.
Syria.
That's what I meant to say, thank you. Bravo Zulu, sir. But they do have every type of Scud that North Korea has made. So they have B, C, D, and ER, which is really a D with a little bit longer range. After the Gulf War, the first Gulf War in 1991, where Syria actually fought with American forces and Arab forces, you all probably know this, Saudi Arabia offered to pay everybody lots and lots of money. They offered the United States money, and of course the United States turned them down. Well, Syria accepted that money, so suddenly they have all these hundreds of millions of dollars from the Saudi government. What are they going to do with it? Well, they use that money to make a contract with the North Koreans to put together a fabrication facility where they could put together Scud-Ds on their own soil. And that factory is operating today. So, interesting stuff. They have, and the money ran out eventually, they have collaborated with the Iranians on much of this stuff. The Iranians fund much of this stuff. And there was a news report that was confirmed later in the open press by our own State Department that in 2009, the Syrians gave 4 Scud-D missiles to Hezbollah. So, nice guys, huh? Conventional weapons. This, by the way, is a T-55 tank on your left, and this is a version with a specific weapon system on it that when you look at the picture, it could only be a North Korean tank, period. This is also an SA-7 Grail provided to the Syrians by the North Koreans. They have provided nearly every kind of conventional weapon system that the Syrians need. This has been a gold mine for the North Koreans because the Syrians had all these weapon systems, this old Soviet gear, and the North Koreans make all that stuff. And they have to train guys on how to use it. So tanks, trucks, artillery, SKS rifles, on and on and on. In 2013, it was actually confirmed that North Korean pilots were flying helicopters for the Syrian Air Force. So, and lots of North Korean advisors in Syria. There's even a report of a command center that they were operating jointly with the Iranians. Hezbollah. Everybody understands here that the North Koreans have been providing Hezbollah support for a long time, right? Since the 1980s, largely financed by Iran, includes everything. Support to construction of facilities. In fact, when they went into Lebanon between 2003 and 2006 to build those underground facilities for Hezbollah, they went in with the Iranians in the Bekaa Valley disguised as Chinese busboys. So very interesting stuff. They actually used the KOMID, the Korean Mining Development Company, which is, by the way, under sanction by the United States, to go in there and design the tunnels, help them build the tunnels, and assist them with reinforcing those tunnels. So very interesting stuff. They also provide lots and lots of small arms for Hezbollah, grenades, RPGs, etc. But I think everybody in here knows the most important thing that they supply for Hezbollah that's been a threat against Israel, and that's the rockets. Yeah. 122s, 107 multiple rocket launchers, those little, like what you see on the screen, that little one rocket thing that's fired. They supply lots and lots of those. As often as not, they'll put the parts for those things on a ship, break the parts up into different packages, so it's throughout the entire containers, and then those ships will go into either Syria or Iran, where the rockets themselves will be assembled and then sent into Lebanon. That's how that works for, for the rockets. Chemical weapons, nothing for sure, but there are several reports that Hezbollah and North Korea are trying to work out a deal where they can put chemical weapons on the multiple rocket launchers that they have. Remember, the 122 millimeter multiple rocket launchers that Hezbollah has is exactly the same as the MRLs, the 122s that the Syrians use to launch chemical weapons at their own people. What about Hamas? Does everybody remember this? The tunnels that Hamas had going into Israel? Those were, no doubt, built with North Korean training. What we don't know is where they did it. I mean, you guys are experts on this more than I am, especially guys like Avi, but to my knowledge, it would be very difficult for North Korean operatives to get into the Gaza Strip and actually assist with these tunnels. No?
You want to look at
Okay. Well, then certainly possible.
The Hamas people were trained by these tunnels.
Yes. Well, actually, they were trained by North Koreans. Yeah. So what I have heard people opine about, I don't know if this is true or not, is that perhaps they got that training in Iran or in Lebanon, as you said.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that we know for sure. They were trained to build these tunnels by North Koreans. There's also a report that's been certified several times that North Koreans sold 122s and 107 millimeter rockets to Hamas. About a $300,000 deal, I believe, was what that was for. And that sale was direct, an agreement signed directly between Hamas and North Korea. And as I said, when it comes to Hezbollah and Hamas, most of that is largely financed by Iran. But the way the deals have gone down is really interesting. Sometimes it's between the North Koreans and Syria and these organizations. Sometimes it's between North Korea and the IRGC and these organizations. And sometimes it's directly. There doesn't seem to be a set pattern. But what matters is that these weapons are streaming into the Middle East, they're being pointed at Israel, and they're coming from North Korea. So, we're almost done here, and then I can answer lots and lots of questions if anybody's still awake. North Korean assistance has been a key factor in the rapid development and capability of Iran's ballistic missile program. Let there be no doubt in your mind. That is a fact. That is not just an assessment. That's just the way it is. North Korea's assistance has enabled Iran's HEU program in a variety of ways. We can confirm that the North Koreans built those underground facilities for their centrifuge facilities, for the Iranians that make it very difficult, for example, for an Israeli F-16 with bunker buster bombs to take them out. They're just the best underground facilities in the world. So we can confirm these types of things. The Syrian civil war has been a gold mine for the North Koreans. Now, something happened last year that may kind of put a kibosh on that, at least somewhat. Everybody knows what that is, right? The Russians came in. The North Koreans don't make T-90 tanks. So that's way too advanced for them. And did anybody see that YouTube about one of the rebel groups taking out a Russian T-90 tank? Was that 2 weeks ago? Yeah, so, you know, the Russians are doing some things for the Syrians that the North Koreans just simply can't do. They're just not as advanced as the Russians are. But we know the Iranians are still over there, so the North Koreans are probably still over there. Well, they have to be over there. They're doing lots of other things for the Syrians. What I think is really interesting is not so much that. We know that Syria is being enabled much more effectively now that they have the Russians on board. What I'm interested in knowing is how are the Russians and the North Koreans and the Iranians coordinating over there. I think that's very interesting, and I've seen nothing on it so far, but you know, that's something I can, if any of you see something on that, send me an email. Please. I have cards up here. North Korea's assistance to Hamas and Hezbollah has served to help those guys become a much greater threat against the state of Israel. Now, of course, the North Koreans are doing this because of and financed by the Iranians, but they're doing it. And I've told anyone who asks me any of these lectures, North Korea will sell anyone to anybody that pays for it. And they do nothing for free. This is not about ideology. So things to keep in mind. How do we stop this? Everybody knows what PSI is, right? Peace and Security Initiative? No. It's the Proliferation Security Initiative. Signed in Poland in 2002, an initiative of the Bush administration, where now 98 member states, including Israel, have agreed that they will stop proliferation where they can using the resources that they have, including stopping ships on the high seas, etc. Who here thinks that's worked well? I mean, it looks great on paper, right? I mean,
Yeah, Libya, son.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it looks great on paper, and Israel's actually, you know, they've more than anybody else has stopped some real stuff. But it's probably the best thing to equate it to, the best corollary is how many of the drugs does the United States stop that are entering in the United States from Mexico? What, like 2% maybe? And it's the same way with the Proliferation Security Initiative. It looks great on paper. And I would tell you the same thing about sanctions. It looks great on paper. So I'm going to tell you what the solution is. And then everyone in here will, Japanese style, go, ah, so das. Konnichiwa, baitoshi. And I'll talk about that. But before I do that, let me talk about what's coming up with Iran. And everybody here cares about these national security issues, or you wouldn't be here unless you're coming for the free wine.
No wine.
It's not free? That's communism. Now, what's a lesson that Iran learned from North Korea? Deny, delay, delay, deny. What do I mean by that? Think about it. When Iran got their nuclear weaponization program, they denied they had it, right? When they finally agreed, well, maybe we do have it, they delayed talks, right? They delayed talks, and they delayed making any real decision. By the way, to get back to the question that gentleman asked back there, the agreement that we have with Iran is all about their nuclear program as if nothing else exists.
That's right.
It's not, you know, just crazy. So you delay the talks, then you delay implementation of the talks. And what does that mean for a nuclear or a missile agreement?
Can go on and on.
No. Verification, right? They delay verification, right? Because verification is how you prove those things are actually going along. That's how North Korea and the United States had their falling out right at the end of the Bush administration when they told us, yes, we've dismantled our nuclear program. Of course, they've had 2 nuclear tests since then, so I'm guessing that that was not true. And then, in the end, you deny inspection of the agreements you made, and that's the end. So you try and get all the goodies you can, and this is true for North Korea, and it's true for Iran. Everybody knows that, right? Get all the goodies you can before the other side finally says enough and walks away. So
What can we do?
I'll get right to you. I'm almost done. What can we do to stop North Korea from doing this? I have the answer, okay? But nobody's listening to me.
Let's hear.
I'm just a lowly professor at a jerkwater college in West Texas. We've done it once before. There is a template for doing this. We proved that we could squeeze North Korea. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? 2005? Anybody? Anyone? No? 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 All good guesses. I'm enjoying this. In 2005, the Treasury Department sanctioned Banco Delta Asia in Macau. The Treasury Department said, if North Korean money's in this bank, there will be no American money there. And I'm proud to be an American and say we got more dough than anybody else. So where we go, the world tends to follow. What happened when we did that in 2005? It created a snowball effect all over Asia. People started to, banks even in China, Singapore, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Southeast Asia started telling North Koreans, you cannot put your money here. because we don't want the Japanese and the Israelis and the South Koreans and the Swiss to stop putting their money here. We had them, it got so bad that by early 2007, North Korean diplomats were taking suitcases full of cash to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, because that's the only place that would take their money anymore. We could do that again. Hope you're hearing me. We could do that tomorrow, but nobody wants to do it. All I would say to that is, if somebody says, we want to pressure North Korea, and then says, we're not going to do the same thing we did in 2005, then I would say, don't say we don't want to put too much pressure on Korea. We want to back them into a corner, because that's what pressure is all about, getting them to that point where they're desperate. So that's the answer. That's how we can get North Korea to stop proliferating. That's how we can get them back to the bargaining table. I don't think it's going to happen within the next year. Everybody knows who the American president is, and I have my doubts. But that's where we are right now. I'm ready for questions. Sir.
Two questions goes both ways. One, you were talking about plutonium, you were talking about HUE. I'm convinced that a 55-gallon drum with radioactive waste and 200 pounds of C in a cargo container would take out LA's shipping terminals for years. That's one. So, I don't know how you protect against that. You don't need to have full-blown nuclear capability. You just have to have nuclear waste.
Okay, but is there a question mark at the end of that sentence?
The question mark is, how do you defend against that, number one? And the second one is, given launch phases with liquid long-distance rockets, there is a startup time, right?
Right.
And we have, I believe, in the American arsenal, I don't know about the Israeli arsenal, EMPs. Would a preemptive EMP stop some of this crap before it really got nasty?
Good questions. Now, first of all, let me go back to what you said about the second part of your question, where you talked about rockets and warning time. Warning time is very important. What happens with North Korea when we see them putting that rock? Well, first what happens is they have a factory that's about 40 kilometers south of their facility. North Korea is covered by electronic surveillance, specifically satellites, more than the Soviet Union was during the Cold War. That's how much we look at them, everybody. So the first hint that they're going to do something comes when they stick that 3-stage missile on a train and roll it up to that facility, right? Then they have to take the train, they have to take it off the train, then they have to load all 3 stages on the launch pad, then they have to fuel it with liquid fuel, which takes about a day. And what are we doing as they're doing that? Anybody know? We got RC-135s flying around North Korea. We got Aegis-equipped ships that have anti-missile missiles, which is a name that sounds like it's kind of out of Star Trek. The anti-pets. But all that stuff's going on. The Japanese, the South Koreans, the United States. Well, what if they had a missile that they could just put on a transporter, erector launcher like this, and launch? What would that do to our warning time? It would take it away. Guess what? They're developing that kind of missile. It's called the KN-08. And once that missile is operational, which the commander of U.S. Forces Korea said is very soon, which the director of national intelligence for the U.S. said is very soon, what do we do for warning time? They could, because it comes on a tractor trailer, they could launch it from anywhere. There's no warning. So that's a big deal. This latest rocket that they launched, that rocket, I don't think they could ever launch that. The one with the 80-ton rocket booster they built for the Iranians.
Right.
I don't think that they could ever launch that without us taking it out on the pad if we wanted to, frankly. What was the other part of your question? EMP. EMP. This was in my last book, which is available on Amazon.com for $29.95. Wait a minute, I'm prepared for this. Buy my book. In my last book, I talked about it. It is confirmed that North Korea has an EMP program. It's confirmed they got that program from the Russians. What is not What we don't know, what I don't know, they may know it in classified channels, is how far along that program is. Now, I was asked on a radio show, everybody here know who Frank Gaffney is? Yeah. He's got a radio show, and I was on it a couple weeks ago, and he asked me on that show, that satellite that the North Koreans launched, could they use that for EMP? And I said, I don't know. I just don't know how far along they are in the program, but what we do know is they have the program. Does that answer your question, sir?
Partly, but my question was, would the U.S. use an EMP weapon proactively to shut down an Iranian war move or a North Korean war move?
Not that I know of. They might. I gotta get somebody in the other side. The young man with the yellow shirt. I'm colorblind. That's you.
Not that dirty.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have also two questions related to the Syrian side of things. First you said that North Korea has, from the last estimate, 5,000 tons of chemical weapons. For comparison's sake, how many tons of chemical weapons do we think?
2,500 for Syria.
2,500. Okay, so half.
Well, they had
So, yeah,
2,500 before the war started.
And also, how great now is the risk of all these weapons, the small arms, the larger arms, the Scuds, even the chemical weapons of that North Korea has been giving Syria, falling into the hands of ISIS?
We've already seen it start to happen.
So,
Yeah. Guy sitting next to the guy in the yellow shirt.
What do you know about the A-10 fighter bomber, a fighter jet that the Americans are making? Is that any good? Is it
Yes, it's a great plane. The Air Force.
One engine. Why one engine?
You got me. I was in the Marine Corps, man. I get nervous when I get too far from the beach.
A-10 Warhawk. It's got twin turbines.
I can tell you this: the A-10 Warhawk is almost impossible to shoot down. Did a great job in the first Gulf War. Did a great job in the second Gulf War. The Air Force hates it because it's not sexy. It's not a fighter. I'm not sure it has a lot to do with North Korea, though.
It has two engines.
Okay.
What is the American capability to counteract the Korean and the Iranian?
North Korean.
What?
North Korean.
And the Iranian capability militarily.
Excellent question. The U.S. has what's called PAC-3s, Advanced PAC-3 Patriots, which have had a mixed record of success. They also have what's called SM-3s, which shoot down ballistic missiles in a different part of their trajectory and their flight. And we have THAAD. Everybody knows what THAAD is, right? Terminal High Altitude. And there is a big debate now as to whether THAAD will be deployed to the Korean Peninsula or not.
So offensively, what do they have?
Offensively, well, we could take out North Korea probably in about a month and a half, but we'd probably take 200,000 casualties. So, I mean, if you're talking about offensively, here's the problem with attacking, with using a limited attack to attack North Korea. It will probably escalate to full-scale war. And that probably means the North Koreans are going to kill hundreds of thousands, not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in Seoul. Just going to happen. So what we want, all of us, I think, Israelis, Americans, South Koreans, is to avoid war. And the best way to do that is deterrence. Let the North Koreans know that we and our allies in South Korea have enough weaponry that if they started a war, it would end them as a nation state. So right now the North Koreans are limiting themselves to provocations that can be easily contained. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Let me answer somebody farther back. Guy in the white shirt.
So we take your idea of stopping North Korea. So you cornered what's the next step? You might imagine they are cornered and they cannot do that. They have to do something. Well, what will be the next strategy?
You mean to go after the banks
Yeah.
and the dirty money? and the front companies? Well, it starts off two ways. The first way is our own State Department has to sanction those banks. You can do this, it's not as easy to do with Iran because they have a much more highly developed and sophisticated and robust economy. But you have to sanction the front companies, you have to sanction individuals, and then you have to say no U.S. funds will go in this bank. And that means, in all likelihood, many other nation states will follow along. Because like everybody else, like any person with common sense, if the U.S. is sanctioning this bank, they're not doing it just for fun. It's because there's dirty money in it.
That money.
What do you expect the North Koreans to do once they are cornered? They could, in desperation, do something great.
Not likely, but it's important to note that when one looks at, like the CIA fact book or looks at something from the World Trade Organization, what North Korea's economy is, what their GDP is every year, that's only the legal stuff. Their real economy, 40% of that is proliferation and illicit activities. So that means Kim Jong-un, or his father before him, Kim Jong-il, would find it next to impossible to keep his elite happy, that 5,000 or so people that run things. Those people drive Mercedes, they drink Chivas Regal, they live in luxurious townhomes. Once he's unable to support them, the government starts to implode. He can never let that happen. So they would be forced to come to the bargaining table. They would be forced to allow us to use real verification about their nuclear and ballistic missile programs, and more importantly, perhaps, proliferation. Because as I tell anybody who talks to me about the North Korean threat, they are not a regional threat. They are at least a two-region threat, because they threaten the region that they sit in, and they threaten the Middle East through their proliferation. Does that make sense to you? Guy in the back wearing gray thing.
Is there any reason to assume that
Speak up, sir, I can't hear you.
Is there any reason to assume that just like Iran has an apocalyptic belief system based on Islam, that North Koreans also have an apocalyptic belief system based on something that I'm not aware of, that would not cause them to react the way you're suggesting that they will in a rational way?
Well, I've studied North Korea my whole life, most of my adult life when I was sober. And I would tell you, North Korea is a rational nation state. And I would say that only goes so far for Iran. North Korea is a rational nation state. Their number one goal is regime survival. So yes, it's likely that squeezing them that way would bring them to the table. I would also tell you, if things escalated and we saw a war that was started by North Korea, or we started a preemptive war with them, it's likely all those elite, and Kim Jong-un included, they'd probably end up running to China. They don't want to die. So I hope that answers your question.
Where does North Korea get their technology? Where does North Korea get their technology?
Most, for which weapon system are you talking about, sir?
Any of these systems that you just mentioned.
Well, the plutonium technology that they got, Russia built them a 5 megawatt. When it was the Soviet Union built a 5 megawatt experimental reactor for them back in the 1970s. They got their highly enriched uranium program from Pakistan. And the way they got it, Pakistan didn't have a lot of cash. Must be boring, everybody's leaving. Pakistan didn't have a lot of cash. North Korea didn't have a lot of cash. So what they did was a barter trade. Pakistan provided them highly enriched uranium centrifuges, technicians, helped them build their facilities, and North Korea in return gave them Scuds. So it was a barter deal. That's for their HEU program. For their missile program, and I don't want to go on too long because I know there's lots of questions. Their missile program, it's fascinating to me. They got one Scud-B from Egypt in 1979. From that they built the Scud-C, Scud-D, the ER Scud, the Nodong, and parts of the Tapodong. They got one Musadon missile from rogue Russian scientists in 1993, and from that they've now not only built the Musadon missile, extended it, they've now got an SLBM, a submarine launched ballistic missile, and they've used that technology to expand the range of their Tapodong.
How do they get all these supplies with all these sanctions? Supposed to be all these sanctions, and they make their own liquid fuel, solid fuel.
They get a lot of fuel from China, and they get a lot of stuff out through China. But it's, you know, the United States Navy has half the ships today it had in 1991. It's hard to enforce. You saw that map I put up there of PSI. How do you enforce PSI when your Navy is half the size it was 25 years ago?
That's right.
It's difficult.
Can I ask, please?
After I get this guy. Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, if the North Koreans were attacked by America, would Russia come to North Korea's defense?
No. No.
Could you repeat the question?
They don't, oh, he asked if North Korea was attacked by the United States, would Russia come to their defense? No, because they no longer have a mutual defense treaty. Ask the next question. Go ahead. Right. By the way, as I told Avi 2 days ago, my parents heard that every 6th child born in the world was Chinese, so they didn't have 6 kids, they only had 5, because they didn't want one. They didn't want one kid to be different than the rest, you know what I mean? At any rate, China does have a mutual defense treaty with North Korea. The question is, would they honor it? Tensions have been very high between North Korea and China since November of 2013. Does anyone know what happened then? No. Huh?
No.
You forgot? Good answer. What is I forgot, Alex? In November 2013, Kim Jong-un had his uncle, Jung Sung-taek, publicly executed with an anti-aircraft machine gun. Unbelievable. But not only did he have him killed, he had all the people in Jong's little spider web either killed or purged. Why is that important? Because Jong was the point man on China for North Korea. It ruined for months North Korea contacting anybody in China, and they're just coming out of that now, and North Korea continues to do things to anger the Chinese. But they do have a mutual defense treaty. So that's the long answer to, would Russia come to their aid? No. Would China? Perhaps. Person way in the back.
Would the sanctions that are being dropped from Iran, or the sanctions that are being dropped, banking sanctions, etc., that are being dropped from Iran, allow Korea to shut off the banks? It would filter through money.
Yes.
So you can't even shutting the banks.
Yeah, well, here's what else it does. How much money was unfrozen? Yeah. You know, I'm reminded of when I was in driver's ed when I was 16, and I didn't know any answers, so he'd ask a question, and I'd just go along with everybody. It's kind of the sound they just heard. But anyway, that money being freed up gives Iran more money to spend on stuff like ballistic missiles. So I think that agreement definitely had an effect on the North Korean-Iran relationship. Plus, it frees up Iran's ability to get their merchant ships around the world and their aircraft. You see what I'm saying? So, not good. I was not a big proponent of Kerry's deal. And by the way, I didn't vote for him in 2004 either. Guy in the red jacket.
Am I wrong in assuming that given America's actions over the last 7 years, 8 years, whatever, that the chance of the United States ever attacking any of these countries, any of these facilities, or stopping it in any way, whether it's even through sanctions, the chances of it seem to me almost nil. Am I wrong in assuming that?
Let me put it this way.
One second. Okay. And given the fact that the odds are that Hillary Clinton is going to be elected president,
I feel like I'm in British Parliament. Or the Knesset. Okay. I think everybody knows this. Let me point out something, because I think we have several Americans in the crowd. Republican. X. Okay. Republican, Democrat. You talk to most people, patriotic people in the United States. They are fed up with U.S. troops being in the Middle East. They are fed up. I mean, we sent 200 Special Forces guys over to Iraq to help fight ISIL, and you cannot imagine the reaction that got in the U.S. So, no, I don't see I really don't see military action taking place. Now, that doesn't mean that if Israel were to take action, that the United States wouldn't support that, as they did in 2007. Remember that? The U.S. was fully supportive of that action, and in fact did a CIA briefing about a year later.
Not under this president.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I just don't. Now, here's the other thing. Diplomatic action was very important. The sanctions on Iran were very important, I think. They're going to be gone, right? So the big question is, we only have this president for another year. We don't know who the next president will be, no matter what you said.
I'm taking this.
Okay. We don't know who the next president will be, nor do we know if that president will actually enforce what is in that agreement, as weak as it is. Because there's no doubt in my mind that Iran's going to violate it. You see what I'm saying? That's just a big question. I can't answer it. But I want to answer somebody else's question.
Okay.
Guy in the leather jacket.
Since, I guess, Japan and South Korea are the more immediate targets for North Korea, and they're more immediately at risk, and they're both, pretty strong industrial countries. What are they doing about the threat to them coming from?
That's a very good question. I can answer you in detail. Japan has joined the U.S.-led ballistic missile defense system. Japan has PAC-3 Patriot missiles on the ground. In fact, they deployed them to Tokyo right before this test the North Koreans just did. And they have SM-3 anti-missile missiles on their Aegis-equipped ships. Okay? So they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. South Korea, in my opinion, has not made the moves they need to make yet. South Korea needs to get upgrades, more upgrades to their PAC-3 Patriot batteries, and they need to buy more Patriot batteries. You know where most of the Patriot systems are in South Korea? Protecting U.S. bases and U.S. facilities. Because we put them over there. They allowed us to bring them, of course. If you live in Seoul, you might as well just do this. All right. Because they don't, they need upgrades and they need to buy more. They're very expensive. I know, I get it. BMD is very expensive. They don't have SM-3 anti-missile missiles on their Aegis-equipped ships. They have 3 of them. They need to get those. Again, very expensive. But the reason I say Patriot and SM-3 is the Patriot catches that missile in a different part of its trajectory than the other system, right? And they need to, and they're talking about it now, they need to get THAAD on the Korean Peninsula, which we would pay for, but they need to get that on the Korean Peninsula. China and Russia don't want THAAD there because it has a range of 571 miles, which means they could take out Russian missiles and Chinese missiles. Well, so what? It's a defensive system. It can't do anything offensive. So that's what those two countries can do. Take note. Yes, sir.
Yes. So what, if you were advising the U.S. and the Israeli governments, what would you advise us to do that we're not doing to be victorious over North Korea?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I did a op-ed piece in the Korea Times, which is the 4th largest paper in Korea, published in English, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, of course, but not Hebrew. I'm sorry. I did an op-ed in that paper where I discussed what the United States should do for Israel. For one thing, I think there should be, and I haven't been a spy since 2003, but I think that there should be a great deal of focus on intel sharing with Israel, focused on Iran and what we can do with our satellites. Israel has great human. We need to share more with them based on satellite technology and SIGINT, etc. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is, we need to make sure that we help our allies in Israel, that they have the same type of systems that Japan has. They need to have the best Patriot batteries in the world, THAAD if they need it, and they need to have the very best anti-missile missiles, such as the SM-3, for their Aegis-equipped ships. And we need to give it to them tomorrow. Does that answer your question?
We're going to take last one question.
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
ask you, if North Korea has all of this equipment, what does China have
a lot of stuff. By the way, everybody, I have, anybody who's interested in Syria, I have a few print-offs of an article I did in the Korean Journal of Defense Analysis. It's very technical. I did this article about 9 months ago, so it's up to date as of 9 months ago.
Is it in English?
Yes, not Korean, not in Hebrew either.
So what has China have that we are aware and not aware of?
China has a lot of stuff.
Like what?
What do you, missiles, tanks, trucks, artillery.
Army in the world.
Yeah, China is advancing its military as it advances its economy. So they're still not in our league, but they're getting there. That's the best I can tell you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So if anybody wants to talk to me, I have cards up here. I got some stuff I can give you, and pins from Angelo State.
Thank you so much for Professor Betal, and thank you for coming. Shavua Tov.
So